Hey guys, welcome to another Rivals of Ixalan spoiler video. Today is the third day, January 3rd of 2018. We're going to be going over all of the cards that were spoiled, released, previewed, whatever you want to call it today. We've got a lot to get into, a lot of really sweet dino cards, some cool pirate cards, a lot of good synergies. So let's get started with the play set or the set of Forerunner cards. Each color, or I guess not each color, each tribe has their own. So Forerunner of the Empire, the one in red, is 3 generic and 1 red for a 1/3 human soldier. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a dinosaur card, reveal it, shuffle your library, and put it on top. This is the common theme through all of these. So you can, the pirate one searches for a pirate, the merfolk searches for a merfolk, and then the vampire switches for the vampire. But they all have a second ability which is pretty sweet, and that is for the dinosaur, for the Forerunner of the Empire. Whenever a dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may have Forerunner of the Empire deal 1 damage to each creature. So it kind of like pings everything, which is a fantastic way to clear out vampires. It's a great way to trigger enrage, especially since you're in dinosaur colors. The nice thing to remember is it's whenever a dinosaur enters play. So it's not just the one that you've selected to go to the top of your library. It's any time. So you could play this on turn 4 and get your dinosaur to the top of your library and trigger this multiple times on turn 5 if you cast multiple dinosaurs. Just a great way to help trigger, like I said, trigger enrage, as well as search up those dinosaurs that you need to help finish out the game. Forerunner of Coalition is the pirate, 2/2 for 2 generic and 1 black. Again, when it enters the battlefield, you can search for a pirate card, shuffle your library, put that card on top. But its pirate ability allows you to force your opponents to lose 1 life whenever a pirate enters the battlefield. This is going to be a fantastic card for Two-Headed Giant. It's kind of got that each opponent loses 1 life clause in there, so when you're playing a Two-Headed Giant game, each head of the giant loses a life because they're each opponents. So if you are playing a pirate deck, obviously you control means only you, not your partner. So that's a little bit of a part of a stipulation there. So if you're in pirates, this is a huge win for you guys. Being able to pull out your your big creature, your finisher early on. If you get a pirate win condition. But if you just have, a couple pirates that you want to be able to play early on, there's nothing wrong with picking up a couple 1-drops, a couple 2-drops, and playing them on turn 4. There's nothing wrong with turn 4, lose 4 life. If you can play two pirates in turn 4, that's 4 life, just for filling out your board. So a solid card. You're going to play every single one of these that you get. They trigger independently, so if you get 2 between you and your partner, it's just a fantastic win condition. So definitely play every single copy that you get. Forerunner of the Heralds is the merfolk. It costs 3 generic and 1 green for a 3/2. Again, you can search for a merfolk, put it to the top of your library, but when another merfolk enters the battlefield under control, you put a +1/+1 counter on the Forerunner. So this guy kind of gets big. It's okay. It's a little on the expensive side. I feel like the Forerunner of the Empire, the dinosaur one, and the merfolk kind of got the short end of the stick. It just seems like it's a little much paying 4 mana for it. But then again, paying 3 mana might be a little too good. So, there's got to be a good card. There's got to be a bad card. Not all cards can be good. So, I think this is the weaker of the bunch. But at the end of the day, if you're in Merfolk, it's a good card to play. Rounding out the tribes, you have Forerunner of the Legion. This is the vampire. Costs 3, 2 generic and 1 white for a 2/2. Whenever another vampire enters the battlefield under your control, target creature gets +1/+1 till end of turn. this is nice because you can target a creature. You can get to pick where it goes. It doesn't make this guy bigger till end of turn. So that is a bonus. However, you do miss out on the longevity of counters, like with the Merfolk. But in my opinion, while the counter stays on the Merfolk, I would much rather play this card and beef up my most powerful vampire, the one that has flying, the one that's indestructible, the one that can't be blocked, the one that has lifelink. This is a very versatile card, especially coming in at 3 mana. If you're in vampires, it's a great card to add in there. You're going to play everyone that you get. Just the searchability on its own in limited is going to be, for all these cards, is going to be fantastic. It's the dinosaur one and the Merfolk one are going to be a little bit less of a priority because they are 1 mana and more expensive, so you won't be putting multiples in your deck. But for the vampires and the pirates, you will be playing multiples of those. So definitely look into getting multiples of those. Next up, we have our flip card. This starts out as the Golden Guardian for 4 mana, 4 colorless mana. It's a 4/4. It has Defender, so it cannot attack. It can only block. But 4/4 for 4 mana is still a good trade-off. It's a good wall. It blocks well. It kills things, which is fantastic. Most defenders have 0 power, so they can't kill things. So that's a good card on its own. It has an activated ability, 2:: Golden Guardian fights another target creature you control, so you can't target your opponents, targets you control. If the Golden Guardian dies, return it to the battlefield under your control transformed. So at the end of the day, you're paying 2 to kill one of your creatures. Hopefully you have something that has 4 power and 5 toughness. This works good in dinosaur decks. It's a great way to trigger Enrage on your larger enraged creatures for a very low cost, 2 mana. But it transforms into the rare land of Goldforge Garrison. You can tap it to add 2 mana of any one color of your choice to your mana pool, which is fantastic. You can pay 4, tap it, create a colorless 4/4 artifact golem, creature token. So at the end of the day, it's a huge sink, mana sink, resource sink to get this up and running. In my opinion, it's not exactly where you want to be. I don't think this will see standard play. There's, in limited, it's not going to be a first pick. It's not a first pickable card just because it's, it does provide you with that late game mana sink, and you can create 4/4 creatures once a turn. That's not too bad. So it does have that longevity, but then again, there's so much more you could be doing with 4 mana on turn 4, with 4 mana on turn 6. If you get this thing flipped over, there's just a lot more you can be doing with it. The one thing I will say is in like a vampire deck, as far as sealed, maybe even limited is concerned, since the vampires are so small, they're generally token generators, 1/1s, 2/2s, and things like that. This does provide you with some blocking ability and things like that. You probably won't be flipping it anytime soon in those decks, but giving yourself that extra blocker while you get your flyers in and your unblockable creatures in for damage, this would be great to hold back for blocking. So at the end of the day, not a great card. It's a rare. You're not going to see a lot of them. So we're going to move on. Rekindling Phoenix is next. It's a 4/3 Phoenix for 2 red and 2 generic mana at the mythic rare spot. It's got flying, and it's kind of got this new ability. I guess it's not new to the Phoenix world, but it's kind of like a reimagination. Now, in the past, Phoenixes have had the ability to come back to the battlefield, whether that's you pay a certain cost and they go right back to the battlefield. If they hit the graveyard, you can do a certain thing. and it goes back to your hand and things like that. So it's a reoccursion thing. But this one I really enjoy it. I think this is an excellent way to kind of flavor in how a phoenix works, or at least the lore of a phoenix. So its ability says when it dies, create a 0/1 red elemental creature token with, and in quotes, the ability is, at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this creature, return the card named Rekindling Phoenix from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste until end turn. So the second coming of the Rekindling Phoenix is actually better than the first. You got to jump through a little bit of hoops. You got to keep that 0/1 alive for the end of your turn and the whole turn of your opponents. And then once at the beginning of that upkeep, you get your Phoenix back. The other thing that you have to be cautious of, that might come up in limited in some form or another, is if they exile Rekindling Phoenix from your graveyard, the trigger will not happen. So you will lose your 0/1 and you will not get the Phoenix back. So that's just a little bit of rules there for you guys that open these up in limited and sealed and things like that. It is a mythic rare, so again, take it with a grain of salt. Phonetical Firebrand is next. It's a 1/1 for 1 red mana. It has haste. You can tap it, sacrifice it, and deals 1 damage to target creature or player. This is a Goblin Pirate, so yeah, it's common, so it's okay. I mean, it's not the greatest card in the world, but in limited and sealed, you're gonna get, if you get it in turn 1, play it, deal 1 damage. Turn 2, if you're open, you're gonna deal another damage. I feel like if you can get this on turn 1, you're probably going to deal upwards of 3 damage, so it's not that bad, all around. A lot of games, players don't have, outside of red, players don't have a turn 1 creature to cast. And being able to tap this and sacrifice it, it goes a long way as far as, removal spells are concerned and things like that. Being able to ping your opponent for that final point of damage, being able to ping, a dinosaur, in your dinosaur decks. So this card is one of those cards that does branch off into the dinosaur decks with Enrage. It's a great way to trigger Enrage. You pay 1, turn 1, and you're going to deal 1 damage immediately. And then when this thing becomes irrelevant, you can block something, tap it, sacrifice it, target one of your dinosaurs, and trigger your Enrage ability while not taking any damage from the attacking creature. So at the end of the day, a fantastic limited card. Not going to see any play whatsoever in standard. Ramanat Reb could possibly use it, but I feel like the 1 damage that I don't think it's going to be enough. I really don't. The 1 damage, they've got a lot more to play with on turn 1 than a 1/1 with haste. Next up is another translation card. It's called Mysterious End. It's a 1 white, 1 generic enchantment. It says when enters the battlefield, exile target creature with the converted mana cost of 3 or less an opponent controls. And then when the enchantment leaves the battlefield, target opponent creates a 3/3 green dinosaur creature token with trample. This is a bad card. This is 100% terrible. It's the worst removal possible. I know in limited you always want to play your best removal cards, but giving your opponent a 3/3 trampler isn't going to be the best. Isn't in your best interest. I know it's only 2 mana, and that is very, very aggressively costed. But the clause of only being able to snag down a 3-drop. And then giving them a 3/3 on the bounce back it's rough. That's a rough. If it was a 3/3, just a 3/3 dinosaur without the trample, I would see that being a little bit more playable in limited and sealed. But there's just no way giving them a 3/3 trampler is worth your time or investment in a single card. So definitely skip this one if you can help it at all costs. Next up in black, we have Dusk Legion Zealot. It's a 1/1 for 1 black and 1 generic vampire soldier. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose 1 life. That's okay. I mean, you're drawing a card and losing 1 life. That's not all that bad. If you're in vampires, this is a great way to kind of trigger those vampire abilities. You know, if you don't have the like the Forerunner theme going, where you're draining your opponents and stuff like that, or not, draining. No, those are that's the Pyre Run. Excuse me, the giving a vampire +1/+1, then that's not really in your best interest. But at the end of the day, drawing cards is going to get you get through your deck a little bit faster. I wouldn't play more than 2 of these, just because the life loss is a price. Even though drawing cards is always the best 3 words in Magic, draw a card. That 1 life when you only start at 20 is a real thing. Golden Demise is next. 2 black, 1 generic for a sorcery at the uncommon slot. It has Ascend. So when you control 10 or more permanents, when you cast this, you gain the City's Blessing for the rest of the game. And then all creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. That's when you cast the spell, of course, if you have City's Blessing. So when you cast a spell, if you ascend, then you get the City's Blessing. Only creatures your opponents control get the -2/-2. So this is a pretty good card. Being able to board wipe any, vampires and smaller pirates is a good thing. I don't think this is going to work really well against dinosaur decks. But Merfolk, this is going to, it's going to really hit those other decks, those other tribes really, really hard. So, at the end of the day, being 3 mana to wipe the board, fantastic. Early in the game. Late game, being able to clear out some, playing this post combat, clearing out some stragglers or whatever after you have Ascend. Again, not going to be a terrible thing. So it's a good all around card. You'll play 2 or 3. You'll play 2 of them in your limited and sealed decks if you can get them. Tomb Robber, also known as Tomb Raider, is a 1 black, 2 generic for a 1/1 menace creature. It simply has pay 1 colorless, discard a card, and explore with Tomb Robber. Excuse me. So, exploring is pretty straightforward. You look at the top card of your hand. You reveal the top card of your hand. If it's a land card, put it in your hand. Otherwise, this creature gets a +1/+1 counter, and then you get to put the non-land card, either on top of your library, or if it's something you don't need whatsoever, it goes to your graveyard. It's a pirate, so yay. It's a rare card. You're not going to see many of them, but it's out there. Moving on to blue, we've got a couple of translation cards here. The first one on the left is Surge of Memories for 2 blue. It's a sorcery. Return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand, and then you exile Surge of Memories. This is hard to say how it's going to work. I love the art. The art is fantastic. In limited, it's hard to say if you'd play a lot of these. If you've got a really good win condition or some really good instants and sorcery spells, being able to bounce those back and get some reuse out of those again, I would say if you have 3, maybe 4 targets of instant or sorcery spells, you can include one of these. But after that, you're just kind of spinning your wheels, because if you have this in your hand and you haven't casted any instants or sorceries, you're not going to get anything. So there's just no, it's just kind of a wasted card. So tread lightly. I know everyone's like, oh my god, I've got this bomb rare, mythic card, and I'm gonna reuse it with Surge of Memories. Like that's Magical Christmas Land. That's the ceiling. What are you gonna do when you've got to deal one more point of damage, and you draw this card instead of your hasty creature that would get through that 1 point of damage? Like, you're gonna feel real bad. So just be cautious. Like I said, 3-4 targets, it's probably worth playing one of them, but any less than that, just skip it. Pick something else that's more relevant to the game. The next translation card here in the center is Warsail Marauder, 1 blue, 1 generic for a human pirate with flying. Okay, it's a 2/1. All right, you have my attention. 2/1 flyer, fantastic card for 2 mana. Love it already. It's a pirate, so it's a it's a solid tribe in both limited and sealed and in constructed. And then it's got another ability. Whenever it attacks, target creature defending player controls loses all abilities and has a base power and toughness of 0/1 until end of turn. This is a fantastic card. This will see standard play in a control deck. Just simply being able to, Scarab Gods and the Torrential Gearhulks and those like, being able to drop them down to a 0/1. This will trigger the Walking Ballistas and all that stuff like immediately, because obviously the Walking Ballista will die and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, well, actually, no, it won't trigger the Walking Ballista, but because it will still have the +1/+1 counters because its base is a 0/1. But it will lose the ability to do all that, killing creatures and things like that, the 1/1 damage and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, this is a fantastic card, getting rid of the bomb rares. If you open one up in limited, you'll use it just for the simple fact that it's a 2/1 with flying. The extra ability on top of that is great if you've got removal, but just kind of clears out their best blocker for limited and sealed. So if you open one, use it. If you get past one, pick it up if you're in the color. It doesn't necessarily push you into color in draft. So the next card I'm super stoked for. It's got some badass art. And I'm really excited because I wasn't expecting blue dinosaurs. But this is Ixalan Primal Tide for 7 mana. That's right, 2 blue, 5 generic, legendary creature, elder dinosaur, 7/7. It can't be countered. You have no maximum hand size. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, you draw a card. And then also, it protects itself. So this is almost like a Planeswalker, to be honest with you. Discard 3 cards, and you can exile her, and then return her to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So it's your turn, their turn, it's coming back to the battlefield. It's nice because it's coming to the battlefield tapped if you do it during their turn, obviously, for obvious reasons. But it's got that evasion ability in there. No maximum hand size is probably the weakest of the 4 abilities. Being able to draw cards is fantastic. Not being able to be countered is going to be great against the Torrential Gearhulk decks and things like that. We'll come across another Sphinx card that will definitely pair up against this, and it'll kind of be reminiscent of Return to Ravnica when we had the Aetherborn, Sphinx's Revelation, Jace, control shell, the blue-white control shell. But the fantastic card. I don't know if I'd splash blue in my dinosaur deck just to top out on this Primal Tide, but it definitely is pretty sweet. Moving on to green and kind of carrying on with the dinosaur theme, dinosaurs really, the dinosaur core deck really got some helpful cards today. Thunderherd Migration is a 2 mana, 1 green, 1 generic sorcery at uncommon. You can reveal a dinosaur card or pay an additional 1 mana to search your library for a basic land, put it in the battlefield, tap, and then shuffle your library. Obviously, you're going to play this in dinosaur decks, so you're going to have a dinosaur in your opening hand. So turn 2, being able to search up a land and ramp into 4 mana on turn 3 is going to be a huge win condition for later game, for the late game. Being able to search up your splash color in limited, this is going to be a huge card. In standard, it might, if we get a couple more. We'll go over a couple more dinosaurs, but if we get a couple more ants, I don't know if we necessarily need dinosaurs for the dinosaur deck to be a tier 1 or tier 1.5 deck. We need more answers, but having options is always a good thing for these decks. So the creatures that we're about to talk about could possibly fill a role based on how the meta changes. But right now we really just need answers to like Torrential Gearhulk and Scarab God and Ramanat Red and things like that. So those three main decks they just walk all over the deck. So anyway, so getting into the dinosaurs, Cherished Hatchling is the first one. It's a 2/1 for one green and one generic. When it dies, you may cast dinosaur spells this turn as though they had flash. Okay, that's good. Not really sure why it has that ability, but at any rate, whenever you cast, it also has whenever you cast a dinosaur spell this turn, it gains when this creature enters the battlefield. You may have it fight another target creature. So giving your creatures flash and then also enter the battlefield effects to fight is always a good thing. I feel like this might be a good sideboard card for matches against like Ramanat Red, where they're just paying 2 mana to kill things, and you can catch them off guard with this ability, the ability to flash in your creatures. The hard part is keeping this thing alive, because obviously if you drop it on turn 2, you don't have they're gonna answer it immediately because you can't take advantage of the flash ability. So I feel like this is going to be like a turn 4 or turn 5 ability, being able to capitalize on when they tap out for mana and kind of snap back and hit them back with a larger number of creatures. So Polyraptor's next, for 8 mana, kind of a high price tag, 2 green, 6 generic, mythic rare, 5/5 creature. It's a dinosaur, has the Enrage ability, and whenever Enrage is triggered, so whenever this creature takes damage, 1 point of damage, any amount of damage, the Enrage ability happens, and you create a copy of Polyraptor. So this is an interesting card, in the sense that you could really go nuts with it. The copy has the Enrage ability. So, for example, let's talk about Ryle. Ryle is a 1 red mana sorcery card that lets you deal 1 damage to target creature. Right, that's the main portion of the card. So you would deal 1 damage to this Polyraptor, right? And then you would it would trigger Enrage. You would create a second one. So now you have 2 5/5s that have this Enrage ability. So then you cast something like Twin Bolt, which lets you deal 1 damage to up to 2 target creatures. So you deal 1 damage to the first one and 1 damage to the second one, and each of those Polyraptors makes another set. So now you have 4 Polyraptors, 4 5/5 creatures. So you can tell that this can get out of hand, insane. So being able to keep this alive, untapping with this card, can go a long way. People are talking about, it doesn't have haste and it doesn't do this and it doesn't do that. There are plenty of ways to give dinosaurs haste in this standard set. So being able to give it haste that's not a thing. The one thing that would be interesting is being able to trigger the Enrage on your opponent's end step. That way, that would be a way to get around the haste ability. But I believe it'd be easier just to give it. It'd be way easier just to give it haste. There's plenty of ways to do that. So really looking forward to it. The 7 or the 8 mana cost is it just seems a little steep. But I don't know. We'll play with it. So moving on, our last green card is Deep Root Elite. It's a 2 mana 1/1, 1 green, 1 generic for a Merfolk Warrior at rare. And whenever another Merfolk enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target Merfolk you control. Fantastic card. This is hands down one of the best rares in the 2 mana slot. I feel like it's going to be easy to trigger on multiple occasions. You don't have to give it the +1/+1 to this guy, although if you drop in this on turn 2, you're probably going to be sadly starting turn 3 without it because it is so fragile. This is more of like a turn 4 drop, and then hopefully you have like a couple 1 drops to kind of boost him up a little bit. If you've got a couple of the Lords, which give this guy +1/+1, that works really well. So you've got some option there. I do like the fact that you can target other Merfolk. That's fantastic. So kind of takes the Forerunner ability from the from the vampire and add it to the merfolk and just, go buck wild with it. So at the end of the day, you open it, you're going to play it. We got Protein Rider next, is one generic, one red, and one green for a 2/2 Shapeshifter Pirate at the rare slot. It has Raid, and if you attacked with a creature this turn, which is Raid, you may have the Raider enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield. So, yeah, that's pretty good. I think if you would tack on an extra blue mana and make this thing uncounterable, that would be fantastic. I would pay, I would gladly pay 4 mana for not unblockable, uncounterable, maybe even hexproof. But that might be a little too powerful. I don't know. We'll see. Next up is Stormfleet Sprinter, is the same mana, so one generic, one red, one blue for a 2/2 haste, and it can't be blocked. So there's that. Not too shabby. A little slow for aggro. It would have been nice if it was like a 3/1 or a 4/1. That would have been nice for the 3 mana. But we'll see. Moving on, we've got Direfleet Neckbreaker, is 1 black, 1 red, 2 generic. This is a pirate with a 3/2 power toughness, and attacking pirates you control get +2/+0. So not too bad. Rakdos colors. It's an orc, which is kind of cool. Female, I think it's it looks like a female orc. Jungle Creeper is 1 black, 1 green, 1 generic, elemental 3/3 that you can return it from your graveyard to your hand if you pay 3 generic, a black, and a green. So Recursion, fantastic card and limited. Getting those 3/3s back, it's a good body. And having Recursion is always a plus. This next card is going to push our dinosaur deck, Eli's and I's red-green dinosaur deck, into white. I can almost guarantee it. It's a rare for a green and a white. It's a 2/2. It's a bear. It's got Enrage, and it says when it's dealt damage, put 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So yeah, this 2-drop turns into a 4-drop. This 2 mana 2/2 turns into a 4/4 almost immediately. It's worth noting, and it's in the reminder text as well, the creature, the Ceratops, has to survive for the counters to be placed on it. So if it's dealt 2 damage, you are not getting your counters, right? So you have to deal this 1 damage to get it up to a 4/4. So my suggestion would be play this on turn 3 and hit it with Ryle almost immediately, so that way it deals 1 damage or some type of twin bolt or whatever. So deal it the 1 damage first. You have that game plan laid out. Don't let your opponent untap with that with this creature being a 2/2. It's a rare, so obviously you're not going to get a whole bunch of them, but it's a thing. And kind of rounding out our day 3 is Azor the Law Bringer for 2 blue, 2 white, 2 generic, 6/6. You get a legendary Sphinx at the mythic rare slot. Holy smokes, this is a great card. It's got flying, of course, and then when it enters the battlefield, each opponent can't cast instant or sorcery spells during that player's next turn. That's kind of an interesting silence, I guess. It's not entire. I mean, that's not why I like this card. The second ability, or I guess the third ability, is why I like this card. When it attacks, when the Sphinx attacks, you may pay X white, blue, blue. If you do, you gain X life and draw X cards. Ladies and gentlemen, Sphinx's Revelations from Return to Ravnica is back on a creature, a 6/6 creature nevertheless. This is a huge win condition. You pair this with the blue dinosaur, and you've got Recursion, you've got draw mechanic, you've got health, regain health, you've got evasion. These are your 2 win conditions in a control shell. The only thing left that would bring back the same powerhouse that was blue-white control from that Ravnica standard is some type of planeswalker at the 4 mana slot. That's all this needs. We've got the counter magic, we've got the draw mechanic, you've got blue-white pirates that can go along into this. It's going to be an interesting standard series once this releases and the rest of the set is spoiled. I'm looking forward to it. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Tell me what you think about the new set so far. What was your favorite card released today? Do you think Dinosaurs is going to be able to make it into the Tier 1, Tier 1.5 deck list? With the new options that we've gotten today, what can we do with the new pirates? The Forerunners are really cool for limited. What kind of deck are you excited to build in your limited, sealed, and draft formats? I want to hear it all. Make sure you leave comments below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. We'll be going through every day the spoiler season. Remember, we're going to be playing the new set coming up very, very soon. So make sure you check back here every day for the newest episode. And we will talk to you guys tomorrow. Have a great evening.